Well, hello and welcome back. We're continuing our series where we're looking at our SQL Sync application, which is Python. And with this, we're going to learn some Python, which we've been working through, as well as some SQL. Last time around, we started digging into rows. We can take tables that don't exist in our source and create them in our destination. We can do the same with columns. So if we've got tables that have extra columns in the source and they are not in the target, then we can handle that as well. Now, we're moving into data. So we're going to actually work on synchronizing rows at this point. Now, the way we're going to work it with rows is we're going to start with a truncate. And what that does is that's going to empty out our data. So if we go look at, let's see. Let's make sure. So here in my local ones, I've got some records in here because I've pulled stuff across. What I want to do is I want to be able to, and let me get rid of, I'm going to get rid of a couple of tables. So if we go to local MySQL and we look at tutorial, I want to take the breeders, horses, and owners. I'm going to take those out because it's such a large amount of data involved in those. Let's see. So that's missing columns, sync rows. Okay, so I want to go up to sync rows. And for table and tables list, and then I'm going to say if table not in, let's see, what is this going to be? Owners, trainers, oops, gonna get that, horses. So I really would know, I'm not normally going to want to do this, but I'm going to do it here because, let's see, and I do my little cleanups. Okay, there we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if the table's not one of these, then it's going to go through and I'm going to truncate it. So I'm going to empty the table in the destination. I'm just going to say, you know what, I'm going to take everything that exists in the source and I'm going to dump it into the destination. Now I'm going to start with my insert. So it's sort of a typical insert line for SQL. So we're going to insert into, like for example, app user. And we're going to take each of the columns, much as we've seen before. So we're going to go through, we're going to do a describe. So we get each of our columns. We've seen that before. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to have this little thing to say it's the first row. If it's first row, then all we do is we're going to do the name surrounded by these little ticks in case it's some sort of reserved word. Now notice our base is the insert into table, or whatever the table name, and then our parentheses. So we get basically this far. So insert into, like in this case, table name, space, open paren. And then we're going to go through each of the columns and we're going to surround them by ticks. And if it's not the first column, if first, otherwise, we're going to then precede it with a comma. So the first one we come in, we're going to do here, and that's where we finish. And then when we come down to the next column, it's going to say it's not the first column, so we're going to precede it with this comma space, and we're going to do that all the way out, and then we're going to get out to here, and we're going to close that parenthesis, values, keyword, and then open the parentheses for the values we're going to put in there. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go through, let's see. Oh, I'll show you this max rows in a second. And it's because I had some issues recording. So I came through this first time. Now what we're going to do, and I've added some stuff. So the first thing we want to do is we just want to get the data. So what we would want to do is we would say like, let's do address. As we could just say select star from address. And that's going to get us all the records. Now in this case, I don't think I have any. because I didn't do that right. Maybe, let's see, do I have any records in here? I do. And so I get my 3. The problem is if I have a large number of rows, like, I don't know, whatever a large number is, if I want to have more than 10 or more than 20 or more than 100 or 1,000 or a million, whatever it happens to be, like in this case, for owners, trainers, and horses, I've got like hundreds of thousands of rows. So actually, let's do this. Let's just go ahead and keep those in there. And do that. And so what I'm doing is I'm going to pass in the source, the destination, the list of tables, and this max rows. And so if max rows is greater than 0, if it's 0, I'm just going to do select star. I'm going to get all the rows from the table. If it's not, then I'm only going to get the rows. I'm going to get a certain number of rows. Now this is where it gets a little tricky. Let's see if I look at, well, let's look. I think I have a lot from horses. Select, whoops, count star from horses. If I do that, yeah, so there's 1,000 records in there. So I can do, and this is in my local, this is my destination. So if I do that, so here's all my records. But what I can do is I can come in here and I can do a limit. And let's say I do a limit to 50. Then I'm only going to get 50 rows. Well, we've seen this before if you went through the SQL stuff. Now, the next thing I want to do is this is going to just give me the first 50. So instead, what I want to do is I want to do an order by, and I'm going to assume it's ID. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say order by ID. First column is what I'm always going to do. I'm hoping the first column is the primary key. And I'm going to do descending. So what that says is now I'm going to get the, in this case, the top 50 IDs. And now I'm going to get those top 50 IDs. And so now these are the most recent, effectively, these are the most recent ones that I've pulled in. Now I could do something more complicated. I could have something that maybe I've got some consistency so I can find when the creation date was or updated date. But even here you can see date created is not, it's null in all of these cases. Let's see. So now I can, with doing this, let's go back over here to the source, I can actually limit how many records I bring across. What I did most recently was 1,000. So if I come down here, max rows is 1,000. Yep. And so I'm going to send that in. And so that means, oops, sync rows. So that means if, since it's greater than 0, it's going to come through and it's just going to give the first 1,000 rows. Let's do something a little more. Let's do 10,000. That'll probably still be fairly quick. Oops, it's not the sync. So here's the sync. So I select star from, and then all I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through each row. And because I'm doing a select star, I'm just going to go through essentially the same way I did with the columns, where I do, a value, and then if it's a second or beyond, it's comma space. I'm going to do the same thing with the values, except for here, instead of tick marks, I'm going to do singles. Single ticks unless I get a none back, in which case I'm going to do a null, which we've seen this before when we were fixing somewhere else. We saw this somewhere else. I don't remember where, but we have seen this. So apologies if I forget specifically. But essentially what you're doing is going to say, hey, if it's none, then I can't really bring this. So I need to give it a null, and then it'll allow me to insert that record. So if I do here, oh, it's a duplicate key. So let me get a different key just because. I don't think there's a 5 yet. No, there's a 5. Let's do like a, I don't know, 100. Okay, so that worked. But if I do 101, this is what we ran into before. There we go. Okay, so we're moving our way through here. We build up our values. We close it off with our close parens and our semicolon. I'm going to print the insert statement just because, for like debugging purposes. And let's see. Now what I can do is I can come through. It's going to connect to my data. It's going to go in, and now it's going to go blow out a bunch of inserts because I did, 10,000? And so I'm going to get the most recent based on order by that first row, whatever it happens to be. So I'm going to get the most recent up to 10,000 of, like in this case, breeders. And then it's going to do the same things for horses and owners. So it's going to take a second. Like I say, this is why we need to do this limit, or probably want to do this limit, because it's going to take a while, because this is a very brute force approach to bringing our data over. And again, it's stepping on stuff because we're truncating a table and then we're adding this on. Now, what we could do is we could, for example, we could store the maximum last ID from that table and then say, hey, let's just grab everything that's greater than the ID from the last time we ran it. So we're only going to get new records. And there's other things we could do. We could go in and we could do like a record by record compare, but that would be painfully slow for anything that's got more than, maybe dozens or hundreds of records. Once you start getting to thousands, particularly because we're reaching out to different databases and doing this one at a time, it could be very time consuming. Now, a faster way to do this would be to, instead of like we're doing here, we're making all of these individual calls. We could have one gargantuan statement, do this every, put together 100 inserts and then execute all 100 in one shot. There's some things like that we could do to speed this up. But right now we're going to keep it just sort of a brute force approach. We're getting there. We're getting through our horses at this point. I can't remember what else we have in there. Let's see if it's going this way. They'll probably do lookup type, then owners. Let's see. It may just be going in. We'll see what order it's going through the tables. But we're going to go through, we're going to do this. And we're going to have, when we're done, so we can look here, like I think it's probably already done, all dates. Oh, let's do that. Oh, it's deciding it wants to hang for a second. Oh, probably because it's doing all this. Okay. All dates, data. Yeah, because it's hammering this thing right now. Yeah, so I brought my dates across. That's not super impressive, but if you looked at like breeders, open and tab. Yeah, now you're going to see. So here's all of them, and we can see down here, if you look, I've got my 10,000 records because that's my limit. And so now it's pulling all this data in. If I want to do a small database, then I can do this and keep this down to 100 or 1,000 or something like that. So I can pull like effectively a test across. Now, there are going to be some issues that we're going to run into. And we will talk about these as we get further on. Oh, here we go. Now it's speeding up. One of them is actually the primary one that we have to worry about are foreign key relationships. When we try to truncate data, it's not going to allow us to do that when there are foreign key relationships around. We've got to actually empty tables out in a certain order, or go through deletes, or disable foreign keys and then build them back after we've populated the data. We also have to worry about when we do partials like this, where we're only doing 10,000 rows, we have to worry about the situation where we pull partial data in one table and partial data in another, but they don't have like one table, it's referring to IDs that don't exist because they're not part of the partial that was pulled in another. So while this may seem pretty simple and straightforward to this point, as far as building tables, columns, and data, we're really not there yet. Also with that, we may have to worry about what if we have a change in columns from source to destination. And so we're going to tackle some of those next time around. But for right now, at least we've got something that just gives us in a basic sense, it does do our synchronization of data columns and tables. So that being said, I think it's a good stopping point. We'll come back around next time. But as always, go out there and have yourself a great day, a great week, and we will talk to you next time.